What if my family and doctors approached me and sat me down and said, Nicole, you have been working way too much. And since you've decided to spend long hours at the office, you've gotten behind in your housework, you got into that little fender bender before that early morning meeting the other day, and we think it's affecting your choice in romantic relationships. So what we think is best for you is to have us downsize you into a small apartment. We're going to take away your car keys, and we're going to have you stop seeing that person you've been dating. I would be furious. I would be angered and hurt that the people who know me no longer think that I should be able to make decisions about my life. And at 37 years old, I think that all of you here would agree that I have the right to feel that way. But I hate to tell you, this conversation is actually had just about every day. The only difference is the person on the receiving end is usually about 40 to 50 years older than I am. Many older adults lose control of making decisions about their lives as they age. And we younger people, we see that that happens to them. And so it's one of the reasons why we're all afraid of getting older. And we're all afraid of getting older. The fear usually starts in our 30s and 40s, and it intensifies with every new sign of aging. So every gray hair, every wrinkle. And when have you ever heard somebody in their 30s say, man, I cannot wait to turn 75 because that's when I'm going to be living my life? But the truth of the matter is, older people actually don't lose control over making decisions about their lives as much as it's taken away from them. It's taken away by their families, their doctors, nurses, social workers. For some people, this happens all at once, but for most people, this is actually a process that unfolds over time, where the people who are close to them, usually out of feelings of love, caring, and protection, they place growing limitations on their ability to make decisions about their life. But how do older people feel about that? I mean, just like the rest of us, older people want most, if not all, control over their lives. And even older people who have mild to moderate dementia can make consistent choices about things like the food that they eat and how they're provided care. But at the same time, we tell older people what to do. We limit their choices and we withhold information from them so they make the decisions we want them to make. We act as if they never know what's best for them. And worst of all, we treat them as if they never have been or are nothing like us younger people, with personalities, preferences, and goals. Even we can see this in our language. We collectively call people who are older the elderly, as if once you turn 65, you have more in common with this faceless group of people who are bound together by age than adults in any other age group. Now, sometimes we like when we see older people break these rules and they just live life the way they want. I mean, look at Willie Nelson. Willie Nelson has a huge following of younger people. And I'm pretty sure that Betty White, she's having a lot more fun than most people my age. Now that's great for Willie and Betty, but what about the rest of us? Unfortunately, when most older people don't listen to what we tell them to do, we refer to them as stubborn. Now, as a gerontologist, and that's just a fancy word for somebody who studies aging and older people, what if I told you that we could all have that, and we could all live the way that we want as we get older? I've taken a lot of interest in choice and decision-making as we get older, and so I conducted a study that was funded by the John A. Hartford Foundation, where we interviewed 50 people to learn more about how older adults exercise control and make decisions about their lives. And I've got to tell you, this was not some faceless group of elderly people that we interviewed. These were inspiring individuals who had interesting life stories, career histories. Some of them were Holocaust survivors. When we interviewed them, they were between the ages of 60 and 97. And many of them were experiencing some of the challenges of later life that statistically, most of us in this room will have later. problems with our memory, chronic illnesses, decreased mobility. So we analyzed these interviews to see if there were any shared experiences across the group. And the data revealed a lot about how older people perceive this experience of having control of their lives taken away from them. For instance, we learned that many older people feel that control is taken away much earlier than it's necessary, and they can still make decisions. You know, losing mental capacity is not like a heart attack. It's something that goes away over time, and actually for most of us, it never really goes away. But the people in our study told us all these stories about how even small or early signs of mental or physical decline, people were ready to just swoop right in and take control for them, even if they didn't want them to. One example was the case of Lois. Lois was so proud to tell me in her interview that as a single African-American woman in the 1960s, she started her own career, she bought her own home, and now Lois is in her 70s. She has a chronic illness that severely limits her mobility, and from time to time it affects her memory. But when Lois looks in the mirror, she sees the same person who she described from decades ago. So now Lois is telling me during the interview that she had to move in with a family member to get help with taking care of herself. And then she broke down into tears. And she tells me how once she moved in with this family member, the rest of her family went into her home and gave away all of her things without consulting her. The stuff that she has collected over the years, the things that meant something to her, it's just gone. She has no idea where it is. Another thing we learned from the study is that older people have a set of information about their lives that they use to make decisions that the rest of us just don't have. So many older people use biofeedback, how their body feels to them, and their day-to-day living experiences. And they use this to make decisions. But the rest of us, their family, doctors, they don't have that information. They tend to use medical evidence to make decisions. And so what happens is sometimes older people disagree with their family members. So there was the case of Jane. And Jane was a woman in her 80s, survived cancer, but the cancer gave her chronic pain. Now Jane's doctor prescribed her with pain medication, but this medication really upset her stomach. So she tells me during the interview, I'd just rather take Tylenol and have some pain. That's okay. Jane's children, they disagree. Jane's children do not like the idea that their mother has pain every day. And so they argue with her constantly that she needs to take this pain medication that her doctor prescribed her. Sometimes this results in people disagreeing with their doctors. So there was the case of Walter. Walter was 94 when I interviewed him. He was a cancer survivor, and he was also developing blindness from macular degeneration. So Walter tells me in his interview that his doctor limited his alcohol intake to 2 drinks a day, no more. So Walter says to me, what happens if I have 3? He says, I like the happy hour if I've got the company. So Walter did not make any indication he had a substance abuse problem. But in his mind, the social nature of keeping up with his lady friends at happy hour once in a while was much more important for his quality of life than any medical reason his doctor was limiting his alcohol intake. And last, we learned that sometimes older people want to take risks just like the rest of us. But sometimes they make decisions that make other people a little uncomfortable. And when other people are uncomfortable, that's when they want to start taking away control of their life. You know, a few months ago, I was giving a talk in the community to a group of social service providers about my research. And we were discussing this case of an assisted living facility where 2 residents were having a physical, romantic, consensual relationship. So what happened was the staff at this facility stopped this relationship because one of the residents' children did not agree with it. And so one of the providers that was at this event says to me, "Well, I agree with that decision. They were only having this relationship because it was fun." And I thought, what an odd answer. So I kindly said to this person, I actually do a lot of things that really have very little utility beyond them being fun. I like to ride roller coasters. I like to drink wine. I like to spend time in the sun at the beach. And all of these things have some level of risk, but at 37, nobody judges me for doing them anyway. So the findings from my study have a lot of implications about how we need to promote a concept that I refer to as person-centered aging. And this is a holistic model where family, doctors, nurses, social workers all work on trying to have older adults maintain as much control of their lives as possible as they get older, despite physical and mental challenges that they have on the way. Now, there are a few things that every one of us in this room can do if you want to help promote this culture of person-centered aging. First, we all need to start treating older people as if they still have personalities, preferences, and goals. And what this means is we actually have to go beyond thinking of older people as once have being like us and recognize in many ways they are still like us. Remember Lois, whose family gave away all of her things? What on earth was the risk of asking her what she wanted to have done with her property? The second thing all of us in this room can do is value that special knowledge that older people have about themselves and use that to understand the decisions they want to make. Just because an older person makes a decision that you wouldn't have made for them, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are incapable of making a decision. It might just mean that they are factoring in information that you just don't have. So remember Jane with the pain medicine? Her children didn't experience the pain nor the nausea that Jane did. So wouldn't she have known better which medicine that she should be taking? And what about Walter? Walter, it was very clear that at 94, he was okay with not living to 102. If he could go and have happy hour with his lady friends once in a while. So if Walter's doctor acknowledged this, maybe he could have answered the question, what happens if Walter has 3 drinks? Or at least they could have explored together non-alcoholic approaches to socializing. And last but not least, we need to acknowledge that when an older person makes a decision that we are uncomfortable with, that discomfort is not really a good reason to take away their ability to make decisions for themselves. If 2 consensual adults want to have a happy, healthy, physical relationship, don't they have the right to do so without worrying that their children, or worse, strangers, know what's going on in their bedroom? I think that everybody in this room would agree that that's what they would want. So I just gave you 3 things that you can do to promote a culture of person-centered aging. But you might be sitting here wondering, why should I even bother making these changes and treating older people differently? Well, if you think that I'm standing up here talking about these other older people, these elderly people who have had control of their lives taken away from them, you are sorely mistaken. I hate to bring up that fear, but Just about everyone, if not all of us in this room, will be an older person one day. Hopefully, think of the alternative. And so there's a lot of stake in this for you. Because one day, somebody you know, most likely somebody that you care about, they are going to come to you, they're going to sit you down, and they're going to explain how they're planning to take control of your life. Thank you.